was down at the Rose and Crown last night, you know. They got me on telling them about old Puddy Spindler, what used to be sexton, of course, at Edlesborough. Oh, he was the finest grave digger they ever had, of course, there. Well, when he buried you, you was buried, no doubt about that. Not many ever managed to get out of his graves, I can tell you. About the end of every October, he used to measure off a bit of ground big enough to hold all them as he thought wouldn't last the winter, and then cover it over with dead leaves and old bits of sacking and that, so as the frost wouldn't make it too hard to dig. He always knowed them as wouldn't last the winter. He used to write their names on the bottom of his wheelbarrow. I was telling him about when he was a-courting old Annie Sturgis. Well, she had 8 of them a-courting her, you know. 1 for every weeknight and 2 on Sundays. Old Puddy's term was on Tuesday, but he used to sell it for a pint of Old and Mild. And in the end, she made these 8 fellas draw straws for which one was going to marry her. And old Fred Sturgis won her. So old Puddy says, now let's draw for who takes her on her honeymoon. Still, he didn't do himself so bad, you know. He was twice married. His second wife was a widow woman. They had 11 children. 5 was his, 4 was hers, and 2 was theirs. But I never did care for her very much, you know. Well, we used to reckon she was like a winter's day. Short, dark, and dirty. She'd been walking out with old Tommy Fairchild for 3 or 4 years, till at last she got fed up with it. She says to him, here, Tommy, she says, ain't it about time you and me got married? Old Tommy says, go on with you, he says. Who'd have us at our time of life? So in the end, she married old Puddy. Ah, he was a rare one, was old Puddy, too. Wonderful drinking man, you know. I never seen a man drink like what he could. He didn't seem to swallow it. He used to let it find its own way down in the flood. He'd had just about as much as he could hold one night, and then old Tommy Fairchild bought him another half pint. But he just sat there looking at it. He says, I'll never drink it. He says, you better throw it over me. In the end, they tipped it down the front of his shirt. I remember when the old vicar was telling him he ought to go to church a bit more regular. He says, well, I do go, sir, he says, only you never sees me, he says, 'cause I goes where the hymn books have got handles to them, and where they fills them up every now and again. He says, you likes yours ancient and modern, sir, but I likes mine old and mild. Ah, he was a rare one, was old Puddy. They don't grow 'em like him every day, you know. He used to get up at 4:30 every morning, so as he could have a couple of hours rest before he started work. And he wouldn't even buy himself a bicycle for fear that'd take him where he didn't ought to be. But I never did care for his old gal, you know, old Molly. Oh, she was a tartar, she was. She used to nag the life out of old Puddy, morning, noon and night. She had one of these tongues what's hanged in the middle and wags at both ends. I reckon she must have been vaccinated out of a gramophone needle. Well, her and old Puddy never even spoke to each other for the last 3 or 4 months, you know. Till about a fortnight before he died, she suddenly thought she'd like to make it up with him, you see. So she went upstairs and she sat down beside his bed, and she took hold of his hand and she asked him where he'd like to be buried. And old Puddy opened his eyes. He gave her a lovely smile. He says, on top of you. 3 or 4 days after that he died, you know. She thought he sounded a bit quiet up there, so she hollered up to him. She says, you haven't been and gone, have you? And of course that's just what he had gone and done, you know. Slipped off in his sleep. Well, that's how I should like to go if I'm spared. They reckon he had conglomeration of the kidneys and that through to his legs.